The golden dog should have run, but she stayed, barking, circling, limping toward the snowbank. She would not leave it. Not without them. Nina followed first. Marcus stayed back, unsure, until the dog clawed at the ground, then looked up. Something was buried there, something alive. She had been digging all night, and now they could hear it. Soft whimpering sounds. A litter of puppies, trapped beneath the snow. Still breathing, still waiting, because she believed someone would come. Like, share, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. We'd love to know. The snowstorm had passed, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the wind that carved it. A white sheet had rolled across the forest like a tide, swallowing paths, bending trees, flattening everything into a cold, blank hush. Only one trail broke the silence, a narrow line of paw prints, erratic, urgent, heading toward the road. Nina spotted her first. The golden dog stood in the middle of the snow-covered track, tail low, fur matted and frozen at the tips. She was not afraid. She was waiting. When the truck slowed, she didn't run. Instead, she barked, sharp, single, desperate. Marcus cut the engine. "Stray?" he asked, but the dog was already moving. She limped to the edge of the road, turned back to look at them, barked again, then vanished between the snow-laden trees. Nina opened the door without thinking. "She wants us to follow," Marcus hesitated. "It could be anything. She might just be—" "No," Nina said, already pulling on her gloves. "She's asking." The trees swallowed them quickly, branches weighed low with heavy frost. The dog's trail wove through drifts and fallen limbs, sometimes disappearing, only to appear again a few feet ahead. She was guiding them, never far, always glancing back. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by their boots crunching through snow and the occasional bark ahead. Then they saw her, halfway buried in a snowbank at the base of a tree. Her body blocked a small, dark hole carved into the drift. She was pawing at it, frantically, then stopping to whine, then digging again. When they reached her, Nina dropped to her knees. The dog's paws were raw, her sides heaving. She looked up, not in fear, not in warning, but in pleading. "What is it?" Marcus asked, stepping closer. Nina pressed her ear to the snow near the hole. For a moment there was only the sound of her own breath. Then, faint, rhythmic, impossibly soft, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. Whimpering. Nina's eyes widened. "Oh, puppies," she whispered. Maple, the golden mother, barked once and resumed digging with a new wave of exhaustion. "They're trapped," Nina said. "She's been trying to reach them." Marcus crouched beside her. "How long?" Nina looked at Maple's paws. Long enough to bleed. Marcus was already pulling off his gloves. "We need to dig. Fast." The snow was packed, icy, near the top, loose below. Maple had done most of the work, creating a tunnel barely large enough for her body to press into, but not far enough. She'd stopped when the snow began to collapse, choosing instead to shield the opening with her own body, holding back the cold the only way she could. They dug in silence, taking turns, hands numb, breaths shallow. The deeper they went, the louder the whimpers became. Not just one voice, but several, muffled and shaking. Still alive. Still crying. At one point, Maple tried to dig again, pushing between them, desperate. Nina gently held her back. "We've got them. You did enough." She didn't understand the words, but something in Nina's voice made her pause. She pressed her head against Nina's arm and waited. Then Nina's fingers touched something warm. "Fur, tiny, slick, and moving," she shouted. "I've got one. They're here." But as she pulled the first puppy from the snow, she saw something that made her heart skip. The snow deeper inside was turning darker. The cold had nearly won. "We have to go deeper," Nina said. "There's more." Marcus looked up. "We'll lose light." She didn't look at him. "Then we'll move faster." Maple whimpered, pressing her face into the snow as they reached back in, toward the cries still trapped beneath the ice. The cold bit harder the deeper they dug. Fingers stiffened. Breath came out in clouds so thick it fogged their vision. The snowbank, once a simple drift, had become a layered wall of ice and slush. Each handful removed was a second stolen back from the cold. The first puppy was tucked against Nina's chest, wrapped inside the inner fold of her jacket. It had barely whimpered since she pulled it out, a tiny black and gold body no larger than her glove. She didn't know if it was sleeping or slipping. Only its faint breath convinced her it was still fighting. Marcus cleared another armful of snow and hit wood. A broken limb, half frozen in place, angled above the den like a ceiling. The fallen branch must have collapsed during the storm, trapping the puppies but also shielding them from the full weight of snow. "We'll need to break through," he muttered. Standing and grabbing the hatchet from his pack, Maple growled softly, not at him, but at the tree. Her body had grown more still. She no longer barked, no longer dug, just waited, watching them with wild maternal eyes that had seen too much. With care, Marcus split the limb, not too hard, not too fast, worried the vibration might scare or injure whatever was left inside. When the final piece gave way, a pocket opened, dark, round, steaming with the heat of small bodies pressed together. Nina gasped. There were 3 more, curled like commas, their fur damp and clinging to one another, too cold to move. She reached in gently and pulled the first one into her arms. It let out a squeak, weak but sharp. Maple barked once, loud and quick. The sound startled Marcus. "She knows," Nina said, already reaching back in. "She's counting." One by one, Nina drew them out. 2 mottled, 1 red-furred, barely more than newborns. Their eyes weren't even open yet. As she held the last one, Maple stood and tried to reach forward, but her legs gave out beneath her. Nina caught her. "Hey, it's okay." "You did it." But Maple's breathing was shallow. Her chest rose and fell in short, stuttering bursts. Her back legs trembled beneath her, then gave way again. "She hasn't eaten." "She's burned everything keeping them warm," Marcus said. He unzipped his coat and removed a thermal wrap, then handed Nina the emergency foil blanket. "We have to get them out of here." Nina nodded, already working. She swaddled the puppies together, tucking them under the wrap, pressing them to her own body heat. Then she turned to Maple, who had lowered her head into the snow, still trying to crawl toward the cries. "Maple," she said gently, lifting the dog's chin. "They're safe. Let us carry them now." For a moment the mother dog didn't respond. Then her eyes flicked upward. She saw the foil shimmer, saw the bundle moving slightly, and let out a sigh. Long, deep, relieved. Marcus looped his arm under Maple's front legs. "I'll carry her. You take the pups." They moved quickly now, backtracking through the broken trail. The snow had begun to fall again, gentle at first, then thicker. The trees creaked above them as wind shifted through the canopy. No words passed between them. Every thought was focused on heat, shelter, survival. By the time they reached the truck, Nina's arms were numb. The puppies had stopped crying, but their tiny bodies twitched as they pressed together, warming each other beneath the wrap. Maple had gone limp in Marcus's grip, her breathing still there, but shallow, thready. Inside the cab, Nina fired up the engine and turned the heat to full. She laid the bundle of puppies across the passenger seat, then knelt on the floor to cradle Maple's head. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're almost home." Marcus reached into the glove box and pulled out a glucose pack from the trauma kit. "If she'll lick this—" He offered it, and at first Maple didn't move. Then slowly her tongue touched the packet. Once, twice. Nina smiled. "That's it? Good girl." Behind them, the snow began to cover their tracks, as if erasing the path they had carved to that hollow tree. But inside the truck, the silence had changed. There were tiny sounds now. Puppy yawns, shivers, life. And between them all, the golden mother, eyes fluttering open just enough to see her babies breathing. The ranger outpost wasn't far, just 12 minutes down the road. But Nina counted every turn of the tires like a prayer. The storm hadn't come back strong, but the cold was sharpening again, slicing through the seams of her coat and the floor of the truck. She kept one hand pressed on the blanket-wrapped puppies, the other gently on Maple's back. Marcus glanced over, his jaw tight. "We should have brought the sled." "She wouldn't have waited," Nina said. She was already running out of time. They reached the cabin just as the sun breached the tree line, weak, pale, barely warming the frost that clung to the windows. Marcus opened the door while Nina hurried in with the pups, laying them out in the corner near the wood stove. She pulled another blanket from the emergency bin and layered it beneath them. Their small bodies squirmed faintly, still silent, but warmer. Maple was slower now. Marcus carried her inside, and laid her down just beside the puppies. She didn't move, not at first, but when her nose touched the edge of the wrap, her ears twitched. A second later, her body shifted, trembling as she pressed her side against the pile of fur. Nina watched her nuzzle them weakly, licking one, then two, then resting her head protectively over the group. Marcus knelt beside them. "That's the only thing keeping her going." "Then let's keep her going," Nina said. She moved quickly. Warm broth on the stove. Heating pads wrapped in towels. Gauze and salve for Maple's cracked paws. For the next hour, the cabin transformed from ranger post to makeshift nursery. Nina worked in silence, only the crackle of the fire and the tiny noises of life filling the room. She cleaned each puppy gently, checked their breathing, watched for movement. 2 were stronger. 1 was still limp. She kept it closest to the heat. Marcus handed her the camp logbook. "We'll need to note the rescue," she glanced at him. "After they're safe," he nodded. "Just habit." By midday, Maple had drunk more broth, lifted her head, and even tried to stand awhile, only to collapse again, her body still too drained. But her eyes were brighter, watching, waiting. "The way mothers do," Nina sat beside her, speaking softly. "You knew they'd die if no one came. And you found us." Maple's eyes closed, but her tail thumped once. That night the temperature dropped again, 10 degrees below freezing. But inside the cabin, a pocket of warmth held steady. Nina barely slept. She dozed against the wall, waking at every stir, checking the pups, adjusting their blanket, watching Maple's breath rise and fall. At 3:47 a.m., one of the puppies cried out, not in pain but strength, a clear, high-pitched yelp. Maple stirred instantly, licking the pup's face. The others began to shift too, tiny legs stretching. Eyes still sealed, but bodies more alive than ever before. Nina smiled through the fog of exhaustion. At dawn, Marcus returned with extra supplies and a satellite phone. "Good news," he said. "A rescue shelter in town is sending a team. Should be here by evening," Nina nodded. "They'll make it." Marcus crouched beside Maple, who lifted her head slowly to meet his eyes. "You know," he said, "I've seen animals do incredible things out here, but I've never seen one ask for help the way she did." Nina looked at him. "Because she wasn't asking for herself." They watched Maple close her eyes again, surrounded by the lives she refused to lose. She had led strangers through the snow, into danger, into trust, and she had been right. She wasn't just their mother, she had been their only hope. Outside, the wind picked up again, stirring the snow into low waves across the clearing. But inside the ranger cabin, 7 bodies pressed together near the fire, wrapped in wool. Love, and the warmth that follows survival. And Maple, no longer digging, no longer alone, finally let herself rest. By mid-morning, the ranger cabin smelled like smoke, pine sap, and boiled broth. It was the smell of survival, the kind that clung to clothes, hands, and memory. Nina moved slowly now, her motions instinctual, her mind quiet. Fatigue had blurred the edges of time, but the rhythm of care kept her awake. The puppies were stronger. All 4 now moved on their own, crawling over one another in tiny waves of heat and whimpers. Their eyes were still sealed, but their bodies pulsed with life. Even the smallest, the one Nina had feared would fade, had begun to cry out when hungry. And always, Maple responded. She couldn't walk yet. Her muscles still twitched when she tried, and her hind legs trembled if she pushed up too quickly. But she stayed close, curling her body around the pups, nudging them with her nose, licking them clean between sleep and exhaustion. She had given them everything, and now they were giving something back. Marcus stepped inside with a bundle of firewood tucked under his arm, stomping snow from his boots. "Shelter team just called. They'll be here within the hour," Nina nodded, stirring the pot of broth on the stove. "They'll need warm towels and glucose when they arrive. Maybe formula. These pups aren't weaned. They're bringing a vet." "Said they're used to neonatal cases." She exhaled in relief, but didn't let her shoulders drop. "Not yet." Marcus knelt beside Maple. "You hear that, girl? Help's on the way." Maple thumped her tail once, gently, but her eyes didn't leave her pups. "She hasn't left their side since we brought her in," Marcus said. "She won't," Nina replied. "Not until she knows they're safe." He stood and walked to the stove. "You ever seen anything like that? A dog that dug a tunnel and waited like that?" She knew she couldn't do it alone. She knew exactly what to do, Nina said. She didn't bark for no reason. She chose us. Marcus leaned against the wall, looking out the frosted window. You think she was abandoned? Nina's jaw tightened. Most likely. She's young, maybe her first litter. No tags, no microchip, no collar. She still trusted people, Marcus said, almost to himself. Nina didn't reply. She didn't need to. Maple's trust had spoken loudest, not in words, not even in barking, but in every frozen paw print she left behind. They heard the snowmobiles before they saw them, the deep churn of engines growing louder across the clearing. Nina wrapped the puppies tightly in the wool blanket, tucking Maple beside them, her body tense again as the noise approached. Easy, girl, Nina whispered. They're here to help. The door opened, and 2 volunteers entered, one carrying a heating box, the other with a portable vet kit strapped over his shoulder. Both knelt immediately, scanning the scene. 4 pups? The vet asked. Nina nodded. Newborns. Found them under a snowbank. She dug them a tunnel. The vet raised his eyebrows. She did that? She brought us to them, Marcus added. She knew. They worked quickly, checking vitals, warming packs, glucose drops under each puppy's tongue. Maple didn't flinch, just watched, steady, exhausted, but unafraid. She's in rough shape, the vet murmured. But she's not giving up. She won't, Nina said. She can't, not while they're here. The team prepared transport crates, gently sliding the puppies into a temperature-controlled unit lined with blankets and pads. When they moved to lift Maple, she whined softly, struggling to sit up. She wants to go with them, Nina said. She's not stable enough to walk, the volunteer replied. Then carry her, Nina said quietly. Please, they did. One of them lifted her gently, arms tucked beneath her chest and hips, cradling her against their jacket. Her eyes never left the crate, not for a second. They loaded everything onto the snowmobiles with care. Marcus and Nina stood back, watching as the team secured the dogs for the ride back to town. She'll stay with them, right? Nina asked. The vet nodded. They'll keep her and the litter together during recovery. If she pulls through, she will, he gave a small smile. Then maybe they all will. The machines roared back to life, and within seconds the cabin returned to silence. Marcus stared at the fading trails across the snow. They almost didn't make it. They did, Nina said, because she wouldn't stop digging. She looked down at the paw prints still stamped near the edge of the clearing, staggered, bleeding, desperate, and remembered the way Maple had stared at them from the road, barking once, then turning into the trees. She was never lost, Nina whispered. She was leading us the whole time, and now, because they had listened, those tiny lives were still breathing. The cabin was quiet again. The fire had burned low, leaving only coals and a soft orange glow that flickered across the walls. Outside, the last snowflakes of the storm drifted lazily down, filling in the footprints left by the rescue team. In the hush that followed, it felt as if the forest was holding its breath, not in fear, but in reverence. Nina sat alone on the step outside the cabin, her scarf pulled tight, the wool still faintly smelling of puppy fur. The snowmobiles were long gone now, carrying Maple and her babies toward warmth, medicine, and hands trained to keep them alive. But Nina's heart hadn't left with them. It was still buried under that snowbank. Still pressed against Maple's side, Marcus joined her quietly, handing her a mug of tea. You should sleep, she shook her head. Later, they watched the woods in silence. Somewhere out there, a mother dog had fought the snow, the ice, and her own body to give her puppies a chance. Not a guarantee, just a chance. Nina spoke softly, almost to herself. What if we hadn't stopped? Marcus didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low. Then this story would be different. They both knew what that meant. Without her bark, without that look, without the one single paw print trail through miles of untouched white, the ending would have been silence. She chose us, Nina said. She trusted us with their lives, Marcus nodded. And she was right. A week passed. Maple survived the first night. Then the second. The puppies were placed on heating mats in an incubator, monitored around the clock. The smallest one, the red-furred runt, was touch and go for 2 days. But on the third morning, he was strong enough to crawl over his siblings. The vet sent updates every day, photos, progress, hope. By day 5, Maple was strong enough to stand again. She licked her puppies as they squirmed against her belly, each one nursing now with the blind determination of the living. Her eyes, once wild and panicked, were calm. She still watched the door, alert to every noise, but not with fear. With purpose. Nina drove down to the shelter on the 7th day. When she stepped inside, Maple stood instantly. The puppies didn't even stir. Too busy feeding, too full of warmth. But Maple padded to the gate and pressed her nose through the bars, tail slowly wagging. "She remembers you," the shelter staff said. Nina dropped to her knees. How could she not? They sat together for a long time, Maple's head resting in Nina's hands, her body now healthy again, golden fur brushed and soft. Nina looked over at the pups. 4 tiny reasons to keep believing in instinct. 4 proof points that love doesn't always speak in words. Marcus arrived later with a folded-up sign. He propped it outside the gate and stepped back. It read, "Maple, survivor, mother hero. All adopted together, non-negotiable." The shelter director raised an eyebrow. "Bit optimistic, don't you think?" Marcus shrugged. "You haven't heard her story." And they told it again. The tunnel, the snowbank, the bark on the road, the way she never left, the way she waited for someone to follow, and how, in the end, she had been right. A month later, the ad was still posted, but the interest had grown. One family offered to take all 5. Another said they could build a space for Maple and her pups to stay together. A retired couple offered to cover medical bills if the others could handle the space and care. Eventually, they all agreed. A shared adoption, 2 nearby homes, side-by-side properties. One family split by fence, but joined by choice. Because Maple had made her choice first, she hadn't buried her pups to grieve. She had buried them in a place she believed they could survive, then found someone who would come. She did not beg, she believed, and that was enough. There's a path near the ranger station now. A short walk through the woods, barely a trail at all. But at the end of it, beneath a crooked tree that still leans from storm damage, someone placed a wooden sign. It reads, "The Tunnel She Dug, February 2025, for those who waited, and those who answered." And underneath, carved carefully into the grain, because she believed someone would come. If this mother's courage moved you, share her story with someone who still believes in second chances. Subscribe for more rescues that start with a single bark.